Good afternoon. I'm Eduardo Rodriguez, and on behalf of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, B-Lab, and a coalition of 50 impact-oriented organizations, I'd like to welcome you to the release of the White House Initiative on Inclusive Economic Growth, a bold initiative which would support the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to address three monumental crises facing our nation: the COVID-19 economic fallout, a widening racial wealth gap, and climate change. Joining us today are Fran Siegel, president of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, a nonprofit whose mission is to build awareness of impact investing in the U.S., catalyze the deployment of impact capital, and help build the impact investing ecosystem. Andrew Kasoy, co-founder and CEO of B-Lab, a nonprofit organization behind the B Corp movement. B-Lab's vision is an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system for all. B-Lab drives systemic change through interrelated initiatives that change the culture, behavior, and structure of business and the capital markets. Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation and advisory board chair for the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance. And Rachel Carson, co-founder and CEO of Guild Education, a fast-growing company that helps employers offer higher education to their frontline employees. Guild is on a mission to unlock opportunity for the 88 million Americans who are in need of education and reskilling in order to compete in the future of work. A few housekeeping items before we begin. If you are with the media, please post your question in the comment box, noting your media affiliation. While you can add questions at any time, we will take questions as they come in during the Q&A portion of the program. Thank you very much for joining us again. And with that, I now turn it over to Fran Siegel, the president of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance.
Thank you, Eduardo, for the welcome and the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Fran Siegel, and I serve as president of the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, an organization with a vision to place measurable social, economic, and environmental impact at the heart of every investment decision. Our dedication to this vision is what brings us here today, to advocate for the Biden-Harris administration to create a White House initiative on inclusive economic growth. This administration has vowed to prioritize addressing the unparalleled set of challenges that they've inherited, from the pandemic and economic recession to systemic racism and a crisis of democracy itself. But to truly build back better, we at the Alliance recognize that our leaders in Washington must engage the private sector as partners. Impact investors and business leaders are ready to go with tools and capital to promote a just and equitable recovery. That's why shortly after the election, we partnered with B-Lab and a growing coalition of 50 organizations to explore how we could best instill our shared priorities within the federal government. Today, we encourage the Biden-Harris administration to seize the opportunity to create an economy that works for everyone through the creation of a White House initiative on inclusive economic growth. This initiative will play a central role in promoting equitable economic policies across the administration, bringing investors and business representatives to the table. Through this coalition, we're seeking to prioritize two rapidly growing approaches, that of stakeholder capitalism and community investing. My colleague Andrew will speak to stakeholder capitalism shortly, but I'd like to lift up the importance of the community investing ecosystem, which supports local jobs creation, entrepreneurship, and economic opportunity across the country. We must fortify our community investing tools to counteract decades of deliberate underinvestment in Black, Latino, tribal, and rural communities that have, for generations, been excluded from the dividends of economic growth. The COVID-19 crisis struck so deeply because it exposed America's pre-existing weaknesses. Small businesses, once the economic engine of a prospering middle class, have been decimated alongside the communities that they sustained. The resilience and determination of American entrepreneurs cannot withstand this crisis on their own. Impact investors have stepped up with billions of dollars in new commitments to community-led initiatives, but we must do more, and we need leadership from Washington to get there. Our coalition is currently engaging with congressional offices and members of the administration to share our vision and to build support for the White House initiative on inclusive economic growth. Together, we hope to advance the administration's priorities around economic recovery, racial equity, and climate resilience. I look forward to further exploring these topics with you shortly. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Andrew Kasoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Kasoy. I'm one of the co-founders of B-Lab. We're really pleased to be here today to launch an effort calling for the formation of the White House Initiative on Inclusive Economic Growth. The idea is the product of now 50 organizations that agreed to work together because they all understand that our nation's long-term success relies on an economy that works for everyone, and that the promise of that economy requires fundamental policy change that's long overdue. The unique thing about this broad-based coalition is that the organizations range from those that are focused on community investing that Fran just described, to those like mine that are focused on structural reforms to our economy that will reset the rules of the game for business and investors. We call this stakeholder capitalism, meaning an economy where businesses and investors look beyond their own financial returns and focus on creating value for their stakeholders in addition to their shareholders. They do this by creating high quality, durable jobs, by building thriving communities, by closing the racial wealth gap, and by addressing climate change, which in turn grow the economy and create more opportunity for everyone. Our own community of nearly 4,000 certified B corporations are a testament to the value of stakeholder capitalism. These companies meet the highest standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability. They've made themselves legally accountable to create value for their stakeholders, not just their shareholders. And by harnessing the power of business, these companies are accelerating a culture shift in the purpose of capitalism. But the fact is that B Corps and businesses like them and the impact investors that invest in them can't create an inclusive economy in a system where the norms and the rules of shareholder primacy work against it. We also need government to play a role in upgrading those rules so that all corporations and investors are responsible for having a positive impact on workers, communities, and the environment. These issues require collaboration and coordination across many agencies and departments of the administration, and many of them also require partnership with Congress to drive lasting change through legislation. And that's why we're urging the administration to form the White House Initiative on Inclusive Economic Growth. Not to get too wonky with the details, but we strongly believe that the National Economic Council is the ideal location for this new initiative, given its broad oversight over economic policy and the expertise of its newly appointed leadership team. Through the proposed White House Initiative, we have the opportunity to harness the power of the private sector to create long-term inclusive economic growth that will allow our country to thrive. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Darren Walker, a man who needs no introduction, especially after a totally inspiring 60 Minutes piece earlier this week. Darren, to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and congratulations to you and Fran for your unwavering determination and leadership in making today happen, and this call for a new White House initiative on inclusive economic growth. We are so grateful to the B Corp, to the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, and the multitudes of organizations who have mobilized around this powerful idea. We are excited in this moment because we are at a historic moment. We are fortunate that the Biden-Harris administration has already indicated in real policy change that they mean business about inclusive growth, that equity will be a hallmark of their agenda. And we are excited because we know that the people leading this effort within the administration, Susan Rice, Brian Dees, Cecilia Rouse, are people who have track records and careers dedicated to building an economy that is more inclusive. Now, we know that the last year has not been a time of inclusion. In fact, the last several years have not been a time of inclusion. And that is not a political statement. That is a statement of fact from an economic perspective. The last year, while most Americans have fallen behind in an economy that was not inclusive, Most of us with wealth and assets have seen that wealth, those assets grow in value. And while we are happy that our economy is growing, it is not growing and demonstrating and delivering a shared prosperity, which is the potential of this economy if we have policies that drive more inclusion. We know that the last year has meant a COVID pandemic that has disproportionately impacted African American, Latinx, and other people of color communities. We know that Black and Brown owned businesses have been disproportionately harmed and left out. So we now need to commit ourselves to a future economy, a capitalism, as Andrew so eloquently said, that reflects the needs of stakeholders, communities, shareholders. And we believe that this opportunity before us and this call to action to a White House that we know is poised for action and is looking for partners. Please know that the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance, the B Corp, and the many, many organizations who are signatories to this effort are committed to partner with you, and we look forward to working with you in the very near future.
Thank you very much, Darren. I now want to introduce our next speaker, Rachel Carson, co-founder and CEO of Guild Education. Rachel?
Thanks, Eduardo. Hi, thank you to everyone who's hosted today's event. It's an honor to be here and to help kick off this important initiative and to support President Biden and Madam Vice President Harris. And gosh, it feels good to say that, Madam Vice President. My organization, Guild, is proud to be a part of this effort because the challenge of overcoming the crises grappling the US right now are so fundamental to who we are as a country. Making progress is going to require collective action, and speaking frankly, nothing will improve if America's leading businesses don't participate in this collective action. We need to take greater responsibility. At Guild, our mission is to unlock economic opportunity for America's workforce through education and upskilling. We see education, upskilling, and reskilling as a fundamental part of this larger effort to ensure that all Americans have a place in the economy of the future. There are 88 million and growing Americans who today risk severe economic irrelevance and unemployment if we don't upskill and reskill them for the future of work. So what we do is we partner with forward-thinking companies, including many of America's largest employers, to offer education and upskilling to their employees, debt-free, and connect them with the nation's best nonprofit and public universities and innovative learning providers, along with coaching at every step of the way. One of the values that's most important to us is aligning our business model and creating a true double bottom line, doing for us what's right for students and our stakeholders. We, when starting Guild, wanted to align our incentives and to be held accountable. And it's why we applied to become a certified B Corp and have added their evaluation to our 2-year review and feel so honored to be a part of this community. Simply put, with B Corp's help, Guild has designed a system where we benefit most when we do right by our students. It's the #1 criteria we use when we set our business model, when we decide how and when we get paid, when we select each partner in our system, and the hard choices like choosing not to work with for-profit universities and programs that receive Title IV funding. So by setting those initial constraints and joining a community like B Corp, we've been forced, but then able to build a host of unique capabilities that we set for ourselves and that really remove barriers for all parts of the ecosystem. And so safe to say, we so deeply believe in this stakeholder capitalism, these principles that organizations like B Corp and B Lab and others have put in place to help companies like ours thrive. They're why we're able to support people like Leanne, one of our students, a single mom working in financial services, who's going back to school and changing the path for herself, but also her daughter by being able to go back to school debt-free with her company's help. What we know, though, is that meeting the set of these challenges and the 88 million Leannes and building an economy for all Americans means finding a way to address the faulty structure and systemic problems. It's why a White House initiative on inclusive economic growth is so important and so exciting. It's going to help build the critical mass that we need to power progress. Guild didn't become a B Corp because we're saints. We did it because we wanted to align a business model to stakeholder capitalism, and we want to inspire other companies to do the same, and particularly inspire boards and financial institutions to help their companies do this. So we're honored to be here today, and our hope is that this initiative can give other companies the credibility and the encouragement to solve the problems that the world so desperately needs to be solved. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our speakers, and reminder to those of you viewing this presentation, you can add your questions in the comments. If you are a journalist, please list your question with your immediate affiliation in the comments now. We will be taking questions now from all of you, and welcome back Fran Siegel and Andrew Kasoy. So as we wait for the questions to populate, I wanted to begin by just flagging one first question. What are some of the specific examples of policies or actions you'd like to see this initiative undertake? Let me start with you, Fran.
Great, thank you, Sordo, and thank you so much to Darren Walker and to Rachel for sharing your perspectives. Yeah, so I'll start with community investing, and Andrew will give some thoughts on stakeholder capitalism, although I think it's worth noting that both organizations do work and care about both, and the members of the coalition do as well. On community investing itself touches a number of agencies in the federal government, regulatory bodies, and Capitol Hill, and we think that there is a need for interagency coordination, which is another reason why, as Andrew indicated earlier, that we think the National Economic Council, the NEC, is a perfect home for the White House Initiative on Inclusive Economic Growth. So, for example, small business financing policy touches on Treasury, Federal Reserve, SBA, and many other agencies. Treasury oversees tax benefits and programs, such as the CDFI fund, new markets tax credits, opportunity zones. And we at the coalition believe that a greater level of coordination between and among the community investing incentives and tax benefits would go a long way in flowing more impact capital to underserved communities. Another example is CRA reform, the Community Reinvestment Act from 1977. It was refreshed in the Clinton administration and hasn't been refreshed since, with the exception of the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, in 2020, did take a rulemaking reform that we thought showed real backsliding. And so we're calling on the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the OCC to engage, again, in coordinated, community-supportive modernization of CRA, which we believe will be happening this year. So lots of opportunity in community investing to work across agencies, to work with members of Capitol Hill, so that we can start flowing more of this money to the communities that really need it.
Thank you, Fran. And I do want to acknowledge Dennis Price from Impact Alpha just flagged a question regarding the initiative is asking that this work be based out of the NEC, and wondering what engagement, if any, with Brian Deese.
Andrew, you want to take that?
Yeah, happy to answer that, and then maybe I can come back to some of the policy ideas around stakeholder capitalism that you asked about before. There have been a number of conversations with some of the senior leaders on the team at the NEC. As many of you know, this coalition originally came together during the transition and put a lot of these ideas together. But there's also a recognition that the administration has been appropriately focused on rescue in the first several months. And so part of the reason we're doing this now is to start to re-raise some of these issues that have longer term implications and bring them to the fore. So we're looking forward to more of those conversations with the administration now, as they actually have an opportunity to pick up their heads on some of these longer term questions. And just maybe I can circle back quickly, Eduardo, to the question about some of the policy issues that need to be addressed in terms of stakeholder capitalism. What I'd largely say is you can't have stakeholder capitalism if you don't have stakeholder governance. And so there are a range of issues that we need to address, like fiduciary duties of both corporations and investors, so that they are balancing the interests of workers, communities, and the environment. Secondly, to make those kinds of governance changes meaningful, we'll need better disclosure and transparency about how companies account for their stakeholders on a wide range of issues, whether that's workers or about racial equity or about climate. And we need to know more about how investors take ESG issues into account in their investing decisions and their stewardship roles. We also think it's important to start to elevate the importance of workers in boardroom decision-making, and to make sure that decision-making is aligned with long-term interests. And each of these requires significant coordination across many agencies and departments of the federal government. A number of them also require legislation. And so it'll be really important to work on these kinds of issues that are long-term and structural in nature with Congress.
And I think you have in part answered there. Laura Joffrey from Pioneers Post, she had asked a question. So Laura, just really wanted to acknowledge your question there. And I think Andrew did expand on that. So unless you had anything to add to that question, Fran or Andrew, we can go to the next question.
No, I think we addressed it, and I think we need, Laura, great to have your question, and I think we need both carrots and sticks. In government, there's been a lot of activity among the private sector, large corporations, the Business Roundtable and others, and some progress around what we call self-regulation versus regulation and legislation. And so we do think the coalition does believe that there needs to be some sticks and some carrots from the government, and that self-regulation alone of the private sector won't get us where we need to go.
And a quick follow-up from Dennis Price, again from Impact Alpha. Does the focus on policy and structural reform represent a step change for impact-oriented business leaders and investors?
It's a great question. You know, for a long time, I would say the approach, and this is an evolution for our organization as well, the approach that many of the organizations in this space and many of the underlying businesses and investors have taken is to try to do this on their own. And I think a great track record has been created of impact investors looking for businesses that are deeply committed, businesses like B Corps, but many others. There's increasing voluntary action by companies. In addition to the 4,000 certified B Corps out there, there are over 10,000 companies that have actually changed their legal accountability. They've changed their fiduciary duties by becoming benefit corporations in one of the 40 states that has benefit corp statutes. So there's been a tremendous amount of voluntary action, and I think many of us have been focused on that. I think what has shifted is a recognition that some of the challenges that we face are systemic in nature, and therefore they require a change in the rules of the game for everybody. And I think the power of this coalition is lots of organizations recognizing that and wanting to come together to try to address it in a comprehensive way, and seeing that there are real challenges in trying to run around from one department of government to the next to try to address these issues. And so the real opportunity is to have a kind of a comprehensive and a cohesive way of doing that by having a single point of contact. And I think the other thing that does is it allows all of these organizations that are so passionate about these stakeholder capitalism and community investing issues to bring their power to bear in supporting the administration as it tries to make some of these changes. And the last thing I would say is I think increasingly these organizations and the underlying businesses recognize that a lot of these issues are deeply bipartisan in nature. And while that's obviously a pretty hard conversation to have these days, at least behind the scenes, we see much more of that bipartisan conversation happening. about some of these issues when we're talking to people on the Hill, and that's really exciting to us.
I wanted to acknowledge the question from Snehal Shah from PEI Media. Unfortunately, Darren Walker could not stay on with us, so we're always happy to send your question over to the team at the Ford Foundation. But to your larger question, will the impact investment market open up this year to bigger impact funds? And also, what impact evidence and metric systems and standards are investors requiring for impact funds, or when they choose direct impact investments? That might be
how much time do you have?
Right. Not too much time, but
not too much time. I'm happy to take the evidence and impact metrics question. So thank you for that. There's no question that there are a proliferate number of schemes to measure impact. What we have been seeing over the last couple years, and very much so last year, is a growing movement among private sector actors and regulatory bodies internationally and domestically to have the appetite to require disclosure, to encourage the harmonization. And so we see SASB and IIRC merging. We see WEF working with their investor council. And so it's a very fertile time, and have a lot more to say about that. But we are excited to see movement at the SEC, Acting Chair Allison Heron-Lee and nominee Gary Gensler being very open to requiring environmental disclosure among publicly traded companies, and those of us in the coalition who care deeply about the racial equity issues, gender issues, will be looking to push on that as well.
Well, we wanted to be respectful of everyone's time and commit this to 30 minutes. We will be following up with all of you and from the media side that have any questions to set up a direct one-on-one follow-up. So perhaps we can go to closing remarks, Fran?
Sure. Andrew, is there anything you want to say now, and then I can maybe share with the group some next steps and how they can get engaged?
No, I think we should go to that. I would just say we're really excited, and it's inspiring to see how many people have joined us from the media, from staffers from Capitol Hill, as well as people from the organizations that are part of this coalition. And we're really grateful for that. And excited for what comes next. And maybe, Fran, you can talk a little bit about that.
Yep, that would be great.
Thanks.
And echoing, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead. Just echoing Andrew's thanks for folks who are joining us from the press and from the coalition, from Capitol Hill and other places. We're humbled by your interest, and we thank you for your time. In terms of next steps, we urge you all to check out the proposal from the coalition of 50 impact-oriented private sector organizations. And I think that we're sharing those URLs right now. You can either go to bcorporation.net or impinvalliance.org with the extensions that you see there. So check out the proposal. If you are interested in joining the coalition or learning more, there's instructions on the respective websites to reach out to us if so. So we're eager to build the coalition and would love to hear from you. And then finally, we are conducting ongoing outreach to the White House, to the administration, and to the agencies rather. And we're spending a bunch of time on the Hill with members of Congress. I know we have some staffers with us today. So thank you for joining. And we are working in that regard to hone our shared policy agenda for the coalition. And we look forward to being able to share that with you very soon. So thank you.
With that, we conclude our presentation today. Thank you all, and we look forward to staying in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.